I sat frozen in my chair, watching 23 years of my life get reduced to a termination notice while some 24-year-old kid smirked at me like I was obsolete hardware. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, and I was definitely the defendant. Across that polished mahogany table, Jonathan Pemberton leaned back with the casual arrogance of a man who thought innovation meant firing anyone with actual experience. My name is Vincent Hayes. I'm 49 years old, and I just watched my career get handed to a Stanford MBA who thinks cybersecurity is something you can solve with an app. Next to Jonathan sat his grandson Austin, fresh out of business school, already wearing my company badge around his neck like some kind of trophy. The kid looked more interested in updating his LinkedIn than understanding what he was about to inherit. "Your time here is done, Vincent," Jonathan said, sliding those termination papers across the table like he was dealing poker cards. 23 years is a respectable run, but TechGuard Solutions needs fresh blood. Austin here understands the digital landscape in ways your generation simply cannot. Austin nodded like he'd just cured cancer. This was the same kid who'd spent his internship last summer suggesting we put all our security protocols on the blockchain and asking why we couldn't just use AI to automatically stop all cyber attacks. I'd sat through 3 meetings where he used the phrase "disrupt the threat vector paradigm" without anyone having the courage to ask what it meant. The irony burned. 2 nights ago, I'd sent Daniel, my 20-year-old son, a text. "Can't make it to your computer science presentation tomorrow. Major security breach at the office." He'd written back, "It's okay, Dad. I understand." But I heard the disappointment in his voice when he called later. I'd spent 72 straight hours that weekend patching vulnerabilities in our government contract systems. While Austin was probably at some networking event posting inspirational quotes on social media, I was deep in code, protecting classified data for 3 federal agencies. The breach could have exposed sensitive information for half the Fortune 500 companies we secured. Now, here I was, getting shown the door by the same family that had called my work mission, critical just 2 months earlier. Jonathan straightened his tie, acting like he'd just made the smartest business decision since the invention of the internet. "Austin's going to completely modernize our security framework, bring artificial intelligence into our threat detection, implement blockchain verification systems. Real 21st century solutions." I almost laughed out loud. The 21st century? I'd been living in it since before Austin learned to drive, but I kept my mouth shut and reached for the pen. What these 2 geniuses didn't know was that Jonathan's grandfather, the company founder, had been paranoid about corporate takeovers back in 2001. The old man had insisted on a very specific clause buried deep in all our licensing agreements. If the original security architect was ever terminated without cause, all operational rights to the 38 cybersecurity patents I'd developed would automatically revert back to me, not the company, me personally. I'd thought it was overkill when we first drafted those contracts 22 years ago. Back then, TechGuard was just a small Denver outfit with 12 employees and big dreams. The founder had made me promise to include that protection clause in every single licensing deal we signed. "Trust is earned over decades and lost in a single decision," he'd told me. "Make sure you can protect the work if someone tries to steal it from you." The old man had been worried about hostile takeovers from competitors. He never imagined the threat would come from his own grandson's arrogance. Over the years, that portfolio had grown to include 38 patents worth approximately $875 million, covering everything from encrypted communication protocols to automated threat response systems. These weren't just technical documents. They were the foundation of every security system we'd built for 16 international partners across 4 continents. Every major client contract, every government security clearance, every compliance certification. They all ran through licensing agreements that explicitly required my personal authorization as the original architect. It was the legal equivalent of a dead man's switch, and Jonathan had just pulled the trigger. I signed the papers without saying a word. Jonathan mistook my silence for defeat. Austin was already scrolling through his phone, probably crafting his excited to announce my new role post for LinkedIn. Neither of them had bothered to read the fine print on what they'd just activated. As I gathered my things, I thought about Daniel's presentation that I'd missed. He was studying computer science at Colorado State, following in his old man's footsteps, For 3 years, he'd been trying to understand what I actually did for work. Something with computer security, he'd tell his friends. But I could see the confusion in his eyes. Maybe getting fired would finally give me time to explain it properly. Walking out of that building felt surreal. For the first time in over 2 decades, I wasn't rushing back to monitor security alerts or prep emergency patches. No late-night calls about system vulnerabilities. No weekend deployments to protect client data. I was just Vincent Hayes, unemployed cybersecurity expert, carrying a cardboard box with 23 years of memories and a legal time bomb that was about to detonate. The security guard at the front desk looked sympathetic as I badged out for the last time. "Sorry to see you go, Mr. Hayes," he said quietly. "This place won't be the same without you." He had no idea how right he was. I drove home slowly, thinking about all those nights I'd sacrificed for TechGuard's success. The family dinners missed for security emergencies. The birthdays skipped for client deployments. My divorce from Sarah 6 years ago, when she finally admitted I was married to that company more than I was to her. But as I pulled into my driveway, something felt different. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of other people's expectations. I was free to be exactly who I'd always been, underneath all that corporate loyalty. And tomorrow, Jonathan Pemberton was going to learn what that really meant. Monday morning, March 15th, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. out of pure habit. For the first time in 23 years, I had nowhere to be, no security alerts waiting on my phone, no emergency patches to deploy. I made coffee and sat by my kitchen window, watching Denver wake up below me. At exactly 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed, a text from SecureBank International, our biggest client. The message was short and brutal. System access denied. Original architect credentials required for security protocol activation. I nearly choked on my coffee. It was starting. By 9:45 a.m., 3 more clients had sent identical messages. By 10:30, it was 6. The pattern was always the same. License verification failed. Original architect authorization needed to maintain security clearance. I could picture the absolute chaos erupting inside TechGuard's offices right now. Jonathan would be pacing around his corner office like a caged animal, barking orders at assistants who had no answers. Austin would be frantically Googling how to restore security system access, probably trying to figure out if there was an app for that. The beauty of it was the timing. Every single one of those 38 patents had automatic verification protocols built in. The systems I'd designed didn't just check credentials once. They validated authorization every Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. sharp. It was a security feature I'd implemented after a competitor tried to steal our client base in 2018. Now that same protection was working against TechGuard itself. My phone started ringing around 11 a.m. First it was Maria Santos, our head of operations. Then Jeff Patterson from the technical team. Even some clients were calling me directly, trying to understand why their secure communications had suddenly gone dark. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk yet. Besides, watching the news feeds was more entertaining. The first headline appeared on TechCrunch at 11:47 a.m. Major cybersecurity firm TechGuard Solutions experiences widespread system failures. By noon, it was trending on LinkedIn and Twitter. The comments section was a bloodbath. This is what happens when you prioritize buzzwords over experience, one industry veteran posted. Cybersecurity isn't a startup game. You need people who've actually fought these battles, wrote another. Austin had posted something early that morning about exciting leadership transitions and innovative security paradigms for the digital age. The post had 847 angry comments and counting. Someone had replied with a screenshot of a major banking client's error message and the caption, "How's that innovation working out for you?" The kid had deleted the post by 12:30 p.m. Around 2 p.m., Daniel called me. "Dad, I saw the news about TechGuard. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, son. Actually, I'm better than I've been in years, but they fired you. After everything you built there," his voice carried that mix of anger and confusion that I remembered from his teenage years. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is getting fired by people who don't deserve your loyalty. I don't understand. If you built all their security systems, how can they just replace you? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. That's exactly what they're learning right now. You can't replace 23 years of relationships with a fresh MBA and good intentions. What do you mean? Every system I built has my digital signature embedded in the licensing code. It's like a security fingerprint. Without my authorization, nothing works. I designed it that way to protect against corporate theft, but it turns out it also protects against corporate stupidity. Daniel was quiet for a moment. So you could fix this if you wanted to? I could, but I won't. Not for them. Tuesday morning brought a cascade of failures that made Monday look like a minor glitch. The secure communication channels I'd built for 3 government contractors went completely dark. Healthcare clients lost access to HIPAA-compliant data systems. Even basic network infrastructure started throwing critical errors. By 10 a.m., 14 of our 16 international partners had suspended their contracts. The messages were identical. Licensing agreement violated. Original architect approval required for continued operations. That's when Austin made his first public mistake. He scheduled an emergency press conference for 2 p.m. that afternoon. I watched it online from a coffee shop downtown, and it was painful to witness. The kid stood there in his expensive suit, sweating under the studio lights, reading from prepared notes that someone else had obviously written for him. We're experiencing some temporary integration challenges during our leadership transition, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Our team is working around the clock to resolve these minor disruptions to service. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Pemberton, sources tell us that these minor disruptions have already cost your clients millions in downtime and potential security breaches. How do you respond to that? Austin's face went red. We're not prepared to discuss specific financial impacts at this time. Another journalist pressed harder. Isn't it true that your company's former security architect, Vincent Hayes, held critical system access that was never properly transferred during his termination? That's when Austin completely lost his composure. Vincent Hayes represented the old guard mentality that was holding this company back. His methods were outdated, his systems were legacy technology that needed to be replaced anyway. TechGuard Solutions is moving forward with innovative AI-driven solutions that don't rely on obsolete thinking from previous generations. I had to give him points for commitment. Even while his grandfather's company was burning down around him, he was still pushing the innovation over experience narrative. But calling my life's work obsolete thinking was a tactical error of epic proportions. Within hours, cybersecurity professionals across the industry were defending my reputation online. These were people who'd built their own careers using frameworks and protocols I'd developed. The tide of public opinion was turning into a tsunami, and Austin was about to get swept away. Wednesday morning, March 17th, the final domino fell. Every single one of TechGuard's remaining international partners simultaneously terminated their contracts. The messages arrived within minutes of each other, all carrying the same devastating language. Its contract voided due to licensing violation. Original architect approval required for any future operations. I was reading the news coverage over breakfast when my phone rang. Jonathan's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering, just to let him sweat a little. Vincent. His voice was strained, almost pleading. We need to talk. Face to face. Do we, Jonathan? You know we do. This situation is spiraling completely out of control. I set down my coffee cup and laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Jonathan, this isn't a situation that's spiraling. This is the consequence of your decision. You wanted innovation and fresh blood, remember? You got exactly what you asked for. Look, maybe we moved too quickly. Maybe there's room for negotiation here. Negotiation? I could hear voices shouting in the background on his end. You mean like offering me my job back? Like admitting publicly that you made a mistake? Yes, silence. Then more shouting from his office. Because that's not how this works anymore, Jonathan. You didn't just terminate my employment. You publicly humiliated me in front of the entire industry. Your grandson called my life's work obsolete thinking on national television. So, no, there's no negotiation. Vincent, be reasonable. The company has 800 employees. People's livelihoods are at stake here. You should have thought about that before you decided experience was worthless. You should have considered their livelihoods before you handed critical security operations to a 24-year-old who thinks blockchain solves everything. What do you want? Money? Equity? Name your price. The desperation in his voice was almost pathetic. This was the same man who'd sat across from me 3 days ago, acting like firing me was a brilliant strategic decision. I don't want anything from you, Jonathan. That's the point you're missing. You can't buy back trust. You can't purchase 23 years of relationships. And you definitely can't undo the damage your grandson did to our reputation. The board is meeting in an hour. They're going to ask for my resignation. Good. Maybe they'll pick someone who understands the difference between innovation and destruction. I hung up on him. The stock market opened that morning, with TechGuard Solutions down 52% in pre-market trading. By lunch, it had dropped another 15%. Financial news networks were running continuous coverage with headlines like "Security Giant Collapses," "After Leadership Blunder," and "When Nepotism Meets Cybersecurity," a cautionary tale. The most damaging coverage came from Industry Security Weekly, a trade publication that had featured me on their cover twice in the past 5 years. Their article was brutal. Vincent Hayes spent over 2 decades building TechGuard Solutions into the most trusted name in enterprise cybersecurity. His protocols protect everything from major banking networks to federal agency communications. Yesterday, the company's new leadership called his methods obsolete. Today, they're begging him to come back as their entire client base abandons ship. This is what happens when buzzwords replace expertise. By 2 p.m., Yerusian Bring Back Vincent was trending on LinkedIn. Cybersecurity professionals from around the world were sharing stories about working with me, defending the systems I'd built, and absolutely destroying Austin's reputation in the process. One post that went viral came from Sarah Martinez, a security director at Microsoft. I've worked with Vincent Hayes on 3 major security audits. His obsolete methods have prevented more data breaches than Austin Pemberton has probably even heard of. This is ageism disguised as innovation, and it's going to cost people their jobs. Another from James Rodriguez, who'd worked under me for 5 years before starting his own firm. Vincent Hayes taught me everything I know about cybersecurity. Calling his work legacy technology is like calling gravity an outdated concept. Some things don't need to be disrupted. They need to be respected. Austin tried to respond to the growing criticism with another LinkedIn post that afternoon. It was a masterpiece of corporate speak and personal destruction. I appreciate the feedback from industry veterans about our recent transition. However, TechGuard Solutions remains committed to next-generation security solutions that leverage artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain verification protocols to create a more robust defensive posture against emerging threats. We respect the contributions of previous leadership while embracing the innovative methodologies that modern cybersecurity demands. The post got 1,247 comments, and they were all negative. IT professionals were posting screenshots of system failures, clients were publicly announcing contract cancellations, and former TechGuard employees were sharing stories about my mentorship and leadership. The final nail in Austin's coffin came from an unexpected source, his own Stanford Business School. Professor Jennifer Walsh, who'd taught his strategic management course, posted a response that destroyed him. Mr. Pemberton seems to have confused confidence with competence. Strategic management isn't about replacing proven systems with trendy alternatives. It's about understanding what works and why it works before attempting any changes. This appears to be a lesson he missed during his time in our program. Even his alma mater was throwing him under the bus. Thursday brought the board's emergency meeting. I didn't need inside information to know what was happening. The writing was on every financial website in America. TechGuard Solutions was hemorrhaging money, clients, and credibility at a rate that would make .com crash survivors nervous. The announcement came at 4:17 p.m. TechGuard Solutions announces leadership transition effective immediately. Jonathan Pemberton has resigned as CEO. Austin Pemberton has been reassigned to special projects pending further review. In corporate language, special projects meant they were hoping he'd quit, so they wouldn't have to fire the founder's great-grandson outright. That evening, Daniel called me again. "Dad, I've been reading about what happened. I had no idea how important your work was, how much you were protecting. It's just what I do, son. What I've always done. No, it's more than that. I was reading some of those LinkedIn posts from people you worked with. They're calling you a legend. One guy said you saved his company from a ransomware attack that could have destroyed them. I felt something shift in my chest. For 23 years, I'd been so focused on the technical details, the code, the protocols, the system architecture, that I'd forgotten about the human element. I wasn't just managing servers and firewalls, I was protecting people's businesses, their employees' jobs, their customers' data. I think I'm finally starting to understand what you actually do, Daniel continued. You're not just working with computers, you're protecting people. That conversation meant more to me than any LinkedIn post or news article. My son was beginning to see me not as the dad who missed his presentations for work, but as someone whose work actually mattered. The irony was perfect. Austin had called my methods obsolete, but it turned out that protecting people never goes out of style. Friday, March 19th, brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. I was in my garage, sorting through boxes of old technical manuals, when an unknown number from Washington, D.C. appeared on my screen. Mr. Hayes, this is Director Catherine Morrison from the National Cybersecurity Alliance. We'd like to discuss a proposition with you. The National Cybersecurity Alliance was a consortium of Fortune 500 companies and government agencies focused on protecting America's digital infrastructure. I'd worked with them peripherally over the years, but they'd never called me directly. We've been following the situation with TechGuard Solutions, Director Morrison continued. Frankly, we're appalled by how you were treated. More importantly, we're impressed by the elegance of your security architecture. When their systems failed, it demonstrated just how critical your expertise really is. She paused. We'd like to offer you a position as Senior Director of Global Security Architecture. You'd be coordinating threat response across 23 countries, working with an annual budget of $2.8 billion, and leading a team of the most talented cybersecurity professionals in the world. I set down the box I was holding. I'm listening. The salary is $340,000 base, plus performance bonuses that typically add another 40%. Full benefits, stock options, and the kind of resources you've never had access to before. Most importantly, you'd be working with people who understand the value of experience. The number was staggering. TechGuard had been paying me $185,000 after 23 years of service. This was almost double that, plus bonuses. There's one more thing, she added. We've been monitoring the cybersecurity job market since your termination. 17 major firms have contacted us asking for your contact information. Word travels fast in our industry, Mr. Hayes. Everyone knows what TechGuard lost when they let you go. I accepted the offer that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a corner office on the 31st floor of a gleaming building in the downtown Denver, looking out over the city I'd protected for more than 2 decades. My nameplate read, Vincent Hayes, Senior Director of Global Security Architecture. The irony wasn't lost on me. Getting fired had launched me into the most prestigious position of my career. My first day, I received a congratulatory email from Maria Santos, TechGuard's former head of operations. She'd left the company the day after Jonathan's resignation. Heard about your new position. Well deserved. P.S. Austin lasted exactly 9 days in special projects before they quietly asked him to resign. He's back at his parents' house, posting motivational quotes on Instagram. The email made me smile, but it also made me think about second chances. Mine had come through vindication and industry recognition. Austin's would have to come through humility and actual learning, assuming he was capable of either. That weekend, Daniel drove down from Fort Collins to visit my new office. He walked around slowly, reading the framed certifications on my walls, the thank you letters from federal agencies, the awards from cybersecurity conferences where I'd been a keynote speaker. Dad, he said finally, picking up a plaque from the Department of Homeland Security. I owe you an apology. All these years, I thought you just worked with computers. I had no idea you were protecting people's entire lives. You don't owe me anything, son. I'm the one who should apologize. I spent so many years focused on the work that I forgot to explain why it mattered. No, you were doing something important. I just couldn't see it. He set the plaque down carefully. I've been thinking about changing my major, maybe cybersecurity instead of general computer science. That surprised me. You don't have to follow in my footsteps just because of what happened. I'm not. I'm doing it because I finally understand what the footsteps lead to. He gestured around the office. You spent your whole career protecting people, and they didn't even know it. That's the kind of work that actually matters. 3 months after my termination, TechGuard Solutions was acquired by a larger security firm for approximately $127 million, about 30% of what the company had been worth before my departure. The acquiring company immediately hired me as a consultant to help rebuild the client relationships that had been destroyed. Jonathan retired to his ranch in Montana. I heard through industry contacts that he'd started raising cattle, claiming he wanted to get back to simpler times when things made sense. Austin, according to LinkedIn, was working as a junior analyst at a small marketing firm in Boulder, no longer posting about disrupting industries or leveraging blockchain solutions. The best part of my new position wasn't the salary or the prestige, it was the work itself. For the first time in my career, I was collaborating with people who understood that cybersecurity wasn't just about technology. It was about trust, relationships, and the patient accumulation of expertise over decades. My team included former NSA analysts, MIT professors, and industry veterans who'd been fighting cybercrime since before Austin was born. When we met around conference tables, nobody questioned my methods or suggested we needed to disrupt our approach. They respected what worked and built on it intelligently. 6 months into the job, I received an unexpected email from Sarah, my ex-wife. Saw your interview in Fortune magazine. I'm proud of you, Vincent. Not just for the new position, but for how you handled everything with grace. Daniel talks about you differently now. He finally sees what I always saw, that you weren't just working late for the sake of working. You were protecting people. Her words meant more than any professional recognition I'd received. Looking back now, I realize that Jonathan and Austin did me the greatest favor of my professional life. They freed me from a company that had stopped deserving my loyalty. They forced me to remember that my value wasn't tied to their recognition. It was embedded in the work itself. The clause that old founder had insisted on including in our contracts wasn't just about protecting the company from hostile takeovers. It was about protecting the work from people who couldn't appreciate its value. In the end, Austin learned something they don't teach in business school. You can't replace experience with enthusiasm. You can't substitute expertise with innovation buzzwords. And you definitely can't build trust with PowerPoint presentations and LinkedIn posts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. I got both. The security systems I built still protect millions of people every day. The difference is, now I'm building them for organizations that understand what protection actually means. And when I go home each night, I know that my son finally understands it too. That's worth more than any stock price or severance package Jonathan could have offered.